together, or went to school together, I should say. um, and there's kind of a large number of artists and painters at this particular school. Ali and I found ourselves regularly talking about art, but there's all kinds of interest in intellectual history, and we ended up going to the Morgan Library to see Dürer prints together and Schongauer prints, and I've really gotten to appreciate your mind, and it's a real pleasure to see your paintings in this space after seeing them in the studio. And I think one of the places where I'd like to start is, well, I'll say something first. So I'm John Vincler. I'm the co-chief art critic of Cultured Magazine, where a little over a year ago, with Johanna Fateman, started something called the Critics Table, which is a new space for art criticism when so many places are closing or cutting back their coverage. This is a magazine that reached out to me to start a new space for art criticism. It's a great pleasure to be able to see and think about art regularly. And this show is immediately recognizable as one of your shows. Coming in off the street, this is the Leviathan, right? Right here behind us.
Yes.
It's amazing canvas. But there's also several new things that I see in your work in this show, or at least new to New York, or new since your Katona show, I should say. I'll come back to these three things. I guess I'll tease that right now of what those are. Don't let me stop talking without getting to those. But I thought maybe a place to start about this set of works here is to think about your title, Noble / Savage, and that slash is important. So it seems like the first time that appears in English is with John Dryden in a work called The Conquest of Granada by the Spaniards from 1672. And there's a little verse that it appears in. I've modernized lately, but as free as nature first made man, before the base laws of servitude began, when wild in woods the noble savage ran. So there's obviously all these kind of like caricatures of the noble savage, of the wild man, or that are very racialized throughout history. But again, you have that slash in your title, which kind of I think distances it from that history. So it sets up a kind of dialectic, and I see a lot of tensions in your work that activate that bring motion and action to your paintings. So can we start with the title and what you were thinking about with that title?
Sure. Yeah, the slash. One of the things that I've said about the title, that it's sort of a battleground of conversations and opposing thoughts. And when I was, usually I come to titles, especially if it's like a title of a show, it has to be like a umbrella with so many things that I'm grappling with during the time when I create the show. So this show took about 1 year, and the research that I do, that sort of is like, and me and you talk a lot about the research part as well. The research that I do is it's parallel with all the works that I make. I always say that the works end up being sort of like a remnant of me sort of decoding, breaking things down, trying to understand them, trying to understand the symbols of them, their history, and so on. So there's like all these different like rabbit holes that I sort of go down when I'm like trying to understand something that has to do with the show. So like they come in parts, they come in fragments. Like it's never like, I don't start with with the umbrella and then go into the details. It works the other way. Like I start with the details and then I start to get a picture of the entire thing. And that's how slowly, as I was working on the show and doing the research and making the works, I kept thinking about this title. And, there's just, you could read so many things about it, and there's like so many different interpretation about, did Rousseau, was he the one? No, he wasn't the one. Like I have these older magazines that I've showed you from, like they're called Horizon magazines. I don't know if anybody knows these magazines, but they're sort of like a combination of New Yorker and focused on art, but they really go deep into these like philosophical discussions. And it's interesting to read those from the time of the late 50s and 60s, and then read things now and sort of kind of compare notes and see how either they're saying the same thing or maybe a little bit different, So I'm not answering your question, I guess, but that's how it goes. It's sort of like, it's a battleground of different thoughts and ideas, It's the things that work their way into my studio are current events, art historical things, memory, personal history, and so I'm trying to decode all these things, make sense out of all of them, and sort of the work end up being...
Well, even that's dialectical thinking of like the contemporary versus the historical. There's one of the new things that I'll try to tick these off as I go through, but and I hadn't thought about this. I thought about all kinds of different pairings of like the animal or the human and then the other than human. That's in your work too. And then there's also the city, and then the nature. And that's one of the new things that we see in this. Is this the first show that you're showing the paintings that you've made upstate?
Yeah, because just this year I got a place upstate, and a lot of the green paintings in the show were made this summer in the forest. So it's a combination of imagination, but also what you kind of see out in the forest, the way the light kind of captures things, and the things that like you just see in nature work their way into the paintings.
Yeah, so these 4 paintings over here that are green, and then these 2 over here in the corner, the black and white painting, which is amazing. We have to come back and talk about that. When you say battle, that's immediately the painting that comes to mind. And then this painting here. Okay, I have props here. Okay. I was reading something.
You got
this is the surviving image is the name of the book. It's by this very interesting thinker, George D.D. Huberman.
But that's Warburg on the back, right?
Yeah, it's a book about Warburg, Abby Warburg, and there's a chapter about him, how he's interested in monsters. So Abby Warburg is a figure who, I think he dies in the late 1920s. He's in Hamburg. There's a whole group of really interesting art historians that are around him. His library then goes in 1933 from Hamburg to London, where it still is. And one of the most amazing things that he did as this uncompleted project was this atlas project, where he would take black and white images. And this also makes me think of this grisaille painting here, which Ali confessed to me that painting is not for sale. It's a very special painting, this grisaille one right here. And before you told me that, I was thinking about that. So Abby Warburg has these black cloth covered panels. You may have seen them even if you don't know the name. And he would take various images from art history, and even from advertising, contemporary advertising, and kind of group them together by types. and he was kind of tracing these trajectories of like forms across centuries, really.
Like migration of symbols that, I mean, the reason why I'm interested in him so much is because he went back to paganism, and so he was like looking at symbols from ancient times to the Renaissance to our time, but he also believed that these images have like their own, like they could exist and they could just like reoccur and be recharged and so on. So power of images, really.
Yeah, well, that's something I see in your paintings. So there's a few things that we can talk to about this. But I came across this line in this about. It says, "And the records of culture are the archives where we can survey traces of thought intermingled with traces of barbarism." Where we can do thought and barbarisms. And I think when you talked about your paintings as contemporary, I think one of the most distinctive, the kind of maybe the noble savage is kind of within it, that dialectic is also kind of struggle, where I like battle, because struggle sounds like for some artists that might be like an artistic struggle of, any art making is a struggle, but there's a
that also exists.
Yeah. But there's these are very ambitious and fully realized paintings, which is really refreshing to see. There's so many painting shows, and it's nice to see such grand scale and topics and taken on these canvases. So there's a few things I want to talk about. One is one of the things that I think distinguishes your paintings is that you are willing to paint these group scenes, and I'm really interested in the gathering of figures that you have in your paintings. We can go back 500 years to Bosch. That's a real touchstone for you, right? And then one of my other favorite painting shows that's up in New York right now is Nicole Eisenman's show at 52 Walker, which are very different paintings than your paintings. But she also paints these group scenes. And there's one of an auction, and there's another one that's an art opening with all of these modernist sculptures. And I think it's a very difficult and almost audacious thing to print these, or it's a very difficult thing to manage. So but it's pretty central to your practice, especially your larger canvases. So where does that come from, or how do you gather your crowds together?
Yeah, they sort of show up, I think I create a sort of a space for them. I begin the works very abstractly, so the figures come much later in the process. And I think the sort of a web that I create, this abstract web that I create, I'm able to see within the fragmentation possibilities, and as I'm sort of working on the painting, these figures, they start to show up partly, and then the concept of the work also starts to kind of I start to find it as well. So it's sort of very much a spontaneous kind of dialogue with the work. And the figures, they sort of, I was thinking about this today. I have these notebooks. I'm always making these diagrams, visual diagrams, to try to understand things. And I'm really interested in figures in a space that are having internal dialogue with each other. They're not looking at us. They're not posing. They're not looking at us. They're sort of busy doing the things they're doing in their world. And I see them as sort of these figures that are they're mingling in the space, but they could be from different times also. Like, for example, that painting over there where you have that Cyclops figure, and the Cyclops figure has like a AI symbol on his face, but he's also ancient as well. So it's like this idea of ancient and futuristic is really interesting to me.
It's very Abby Warburg of you.
That's why I like the guy. And also, you know, like when you I really got back into. I mean, I've always loved Kubrick, but I really got back into like reading 2001: Space Odyssey and looking at the film, and I was thinking about Hal is of course a Cyclops, right? And he's an AI, and this movie was made I don't know how long ago, like a while ago. So it's really interesting that Hal really destroys everything and can't be contained. So it's like all these dialogues that you could have with films and literature and with art and so on. You need a space where all these things could speak to each other, you know. And I think that's why I create these spaces with multiple figures, because they might also stand for different ideas, you know, and they're having these different clash of ideas with each other too, and they could be from different times and different places. They could be ancient, they could be futuristic, they could be referring to something within our current time and so on. But they're always in this sort of like a dream world, let's say, you know?
Yeah, there is this kind of vapor, or sometimes it's like water or wind, or this like kind of becoming into being, or maybe disappearing. But then there also is a sense, it's these tensions. So you have this kind of diaphanousness, and then you have structures, especially with your lines that sometimes are very pronounced in your paintings, like the step here. You start seeing them. One of my questions to you was, how aware are you of managing how time telescopes through your paintings, which you just got through? But you just mentioned the notebooks. So what are your notebooks helping you do? Are you in the middle of a canvas? Like this is the last one to finish here? Yeah,
it's the newest one. It's still wet on this side.
So when you're working on that, are your notebooks preliminary and then you move to the painting, or are you thinking through, like, you kind of stalk around your canvases and weren't worried about your next move?
Yeah, I have two different notebooks. One is where I write a lot of thoughts and try to break things down in language, and then the other one is like a notebook that I have that I'm trying to break things down visually. And they both help in different ways, you know. The visual one, it's more like trying to remember certain symbols in order for them to work their way into the painting. They don't necessarily end up, it's not like I'm trying to copy them, but I want to internalize them, because I'm more interested in how things happen from memory, and how these things that I'm sort of like consuming, how they will manifest themselves and surprise me as well. And then the writings is, again, it's just like different kind of information that I'm just trying to break down for myself and try to understand. Or like me and you text a lot, and sometimes you'll text like a long thing to something I said, and I'm like, I have to write this down, because who knows what's, I'm not going to go back and remember. But it's like things that I want to remember, things I want to like think about more, and I go back to my notebooks, and I research them more and dive deeper in them more. So I have like tons of notebooks like that are they're like archives of what you were thinking and usually if I go back to a notebook from 10 years ago, it's not like I was totally somewhere else. I was still thinking about the things I'm thinking now, but I've sort of built on them over time.
Yeah.
They're like certain, I see them as like a spiral of thoughts. There are certain things that I'm quite interested in that they keep expanding, and I keep building on it, and I keep building on it over time.
So this is something you've been managing for a while, these figures in your work, populating your work, and you've I can see the kind of depth and more structures that you've created for this, and how you can manage this in these large canvases. But then you have this, and your work is often this like purple or blue. And now I think of it as like that's your very urban work, or it's like this even scholarly work, right? It's like the that it's thinking through history. But then you have this green that is really pretty radically different from what you've been doing. Is that fair to say? At least in the last.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's. Having a place in the middle of a forest, you see things you've never seen before. You see green. Like I have a new relationship to green because I see so many different varieties of green in the forest. So I didn't plan to do it, but it was such a sublime, such a overpowering thing that I was sort of experiencing every day, going into the forest, hiking in the forest, listening to the forest, seeing it at night, that you want to paint that experience. You want to, it's like whatever I consume, it manifests itself in the work, and that's just going to continue, I think.
Your paintings are very immersive. You can look at them for a very long time, and you can see new details. There's often a tension, I think, in that you. There's this third figure that appears in the Grisaille painting. What's the title of that one again?
The Witness.
The Witness, of course. But in the green paintings here, so if you have this like this vaporous or watery kind of space. In your paintings, there's a different kind of verticality with the like you're in a forest, right? There's this Japanese concept of forest bathing, right? And I think it's actually physiologically documented that when we go into the woods, that we can kind of be more at ease. That the eye can kind of like look at everything, but kind of let go of looking at specificity. And when I saw this work, where in these paintings, it's like always trying to like see the thing emerging from the vapor and then understand its relationship to its surroundings, which is a very immersive experience. Your painting of green and of the verticality of the forest, you've captured some, even in these, especially in these small ones here, and maybe this dark painting.
Paradise Lost.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you. You have that sense of. I love good small paintings, especially when they're next to big paintings, so they have to do the work to kind of like say, hey, and like that looks like maybe one of the simplest paintings in the room as far as like you. But it just captures that for me, that forest bathing kind of feeling of letting go in a kind of immersive environment. And then we were looking at this other painting, the larger painting next to it, which is Noble Savage, right? So the inversion of the two terms. And I think I said to you that immediately when I turned around to look at it, I was like thinking about, am I seeing a bird or am I seeing like a tree? Like it captures a lot of the motion that you capture in your other. So I can see like elements that are familiar in your paintings, but there's a completely different vocabulary also that you're grabbing hold of. Can you talk a little bit about that experience was there so? It looks like it's done with ease here when we come here. Like this is just this new thing you adapt to. But what were your challenges of that as a painter and and reckoning with that?
Yeah, usually, I work out of my head. I work from imagination, and I'm only looking at the canvas, and that's why a lot of people say my studio is very neat, and the reason is because I don't want to look for stuff. I just want to look at because as you were saying, I like to capture things where they're in the middle of this transformation. So it's like when you look at a cloud and you see something and you want to capture it, and if you don't capture it, it's gone like that. Where with the forest paintings, a lot of that was happening, but also looking at my window, you could also see things happening at the same time. So there was this parallel miracle happening outside of my windows that I was a witness to every day when I was painting in the studio there. And you can't help not to capture those things that you're seeing. I mean, just incredible stuff that I can't even explain or show a video or take a picture of. It's just as seasons change, things happen in the forest and you're like a witness to it. And you just tell yourself, how am I going to capture this? How am I going to manifest this experience that I just had, that I think it was a miracle or something, So it was sort of all the energy to make the work was all there. And it was the first time that I've actually made work outside of my studio, my Brooklyn studio.
Yeah. One of the other new things that's here is the presence of sculptures. So you have these 5 sculptures without the space. And when I first came into this show, I had seen these in your studio. Your studio is very neat, but there are reference images everywhere in your studio. So it's like there's a lot going on there. It's not as austere as and there's the effect of having, especially these 2 tall ones in the front, is it makes it a little bit more like it's like a slight nod to the forest too, a little bit. Like we're in, and there's these little creatures here, kind of scampering on their plinths in the front. How did I just mentioned that this seems to come fully formed, your relationship to the forest in your paintings, which is something new. But now you've tackled this whole new medium. How did you feel like an amateur when you started making sculptures? Was that exciting to you? Is it like this new space opens up? How do you decide to take that leap and to play with this new medium and
I still feel like an amateur with it because there are sculptor friends I have like Huma Baba, who's this is what she does and she's amazing. But I think what got me feel more ease about it is that having 2 young kids who are 8 and 10 and you give them clay and they just right away it's like this sort of ancient thing, they just know what to do, and they make great stuff, and so just like the paintings, I told myself, okay, I'm giving myself some clay and I don't know what I'm going to make, but I'm just going to start somewhere and see what happens, and I think naturally, even I was showing you earlier, this sculpture here, which is Cyclops, exists in that painting, the Cyclops. But, I didn't plan that, but my hand just made it that way. And I think it just comes from it's like the same hand-eye coordination where things just, the subconscious Wi-Fi comes in and you receive it and you just make the thing that manifests with clay, So I kind of began like that. I made all these different smaller clay works, and then when it was time to go into bronze, it was the really interesting part to learn about that whole other side of how it goes from clay to wax, then you work on the wax, then it goes to bronze, and then you're handed a torch and a liquid, and then you just go after the bronze, you know? So like, there's actually like, we did a video for the Katona Museum show I had in March, and half of the show was recorded in the Foundry, and the video in the Foundry is like the first time I actually went there, and they handed me a torch and the liquid to make the sculpture. So it's like the video that we have is like the first time I'm like, okay, I'm doing this. I don't even know what I'm doing. But right away, you do know what you're doing somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the really interesting thing with making art is somehow you just, you know, the word I like is gnosis, which my 10-year-old uses a lot, like when I tell her.
With a G.
How do you know that? Gnosis. Okay. It's just like this intuitive knowing that you just know this is right, you know?
With noble savage, there's also like wisdom and then childlike, right? There's still the element of play, of like that can never. It's really important to making artworks alive, I think, is to have an element of play.
Well, one thing about also noble/savage that was really interesting to me, it's something that, a concept, like something that I just came across, and it was really, and I came across this through like literature, you know? I'm a huge fan of Gilgamesh. I mean, this sculpture is called Gilgamesh here. And in Gilgamesh, he's this sort of noble king, and he's in search of, he wants to be immortal, right? And he goes on this journey. He goes to the underworld. All these things happen. I won't spoil it, but it's like, you know, the story exists in every story, really. But one of the interesting things is that he meets this other character named Enkidu, who is a wild man. And he becomes one with him. Like, they sort of challenge each other in some ways, and then they merge and become one in some ways. So it's like the meeting of these two different minds that are so different. And then I kept seeing this pattern through other literature too. Like, for example,
We have Rumi here. Is that?
Yeah, there's Rumi.
This
Rumi's
is Rumi.
right here, yeah.
The podium's probably in the way of this figure. So, we were at an event together where Halle Lazagafori read from the new translation of Rumi, The Water.
On the boat on the river, which was
yeah,
like
on the boat on the
siren.
But did you? This is just me like now gossiping publicly and overhearing. You said that she found it very interesting that you painted Rumi green, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't hear the end of that story. Was there something there that she said to you about why Rumi was green that had made sense to her? Or am I embellishing this?
No, I think in like Persian miniatures and like he's usually wearing a green outfit.
He's usually okay.
But Rumi also, this similar to Gilgamesh, Rumi also meets as sort of a savage, and they also become one, which is really interesting because Rumi is this, again, he's like this sort of learned, respected teacher, and Shams is this wild man that just kind of comes out of nowhere and challenges him. And then when the challenge takes place, then Rumi suddenly becomes a mystic. He's illuminated. So there's something deeper also with this meeting of
his book, Wet in the Water, right here, right too, right? Isn't that part of that?
Yes, like he's, I don't know, I just imagine that like the water is coming out of his book and it's sort of like, I don't know, like activating the Leviathan throughout the whole, because Leviathan is ultimately like this sea monster historically, or in different forms. I mean, in ancient Near East, he's like sort of like a winged demon.
Yeah. There's often the element of the monstrous too. That it's like the realm of the monstrous is always kind of it's like it's a membrane between the kind of human and the monstrous, and that you're working in a lot of these paintings. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I think going back to Gilgamesh, the monster in Gilgamesh, Humbaba. There's nothing like Humbaba is not evil, right? Like it's just protecting the cedar forest. That's their job, but Gilgamesh just wants to be a hero, so he kills, and then everything goes to hell.
Yeah. And the line between the humane and the monstrous is something I guess we're always very.
It was a really good article
very
actually
to and struggling with.
in New Yorker. I don't know if I sent it to you, but it was all about like our relationship with monsters historically and how we used to think monsters are so terrible in the past, but now like even in like cartoons and films and literature, we're just trying to understand them. They're like they was saying, like they're just misunderstood. You got to hear their story and see why they're that way, and then maybe they're okay. Maybe they're just protecting something, you know.
The third thing that's new here, there's probably more than three. This is just the things I noticed, is that these amazing works on paper that are the things you have to kind of turn around and see on your way out. But it's like your notebooks. I'm interested in the relationship of kind of preliminary material to final material, and often works on paper and drawings are seen as kind of secondary, and these are very refined, very ambitious, you've brought your paintings into these paper spaces. I mean, this one's really dense, even though it's smaller. It's not small. It's smaller in size, but not necessarily in scale,
right.
Of what's happening in the picture. What made you? Have you shown a lot of drawing? I know you've shown some, like at Katona, you showed some notebooks and things like that, and you've done some prints. Is this kind of? This seems, from what I know of your work, that's kind of a new step for works on paper. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've always done charcoal on paper, monochrome pastel on paper. I do a lot of different kind of intaglio etchings. I'm really interested in that. I mean, we look at a lot of engravings and etchings together. But the pastels, I always wanted to find a way to bring the language of my paintings with some kind of a medium, charcoal or pastel. And just recently, I really started to get into pastel and use pastel and try to understand it. And somehow I was able to kind of like create these worlds that exist in my painting with pastel. But then also the pastels sort of what I've learned in the pastels, they came back and influenced the paintings too. Like the upper part of this painting, I have these oil sticks that I've never used before, and I started to sort of use it in the same way that I was using the lines in the pastels. And also, like with pastels, it's such a, you're just using your hand a lot on the paper to like blend things in, so you see immediately these pigments just sort of like blending into each other. And they're very forgiving, like painting. You could just keep going over them or taking them away and adding and so on. So,
can we maybe the last thing that I want to talk about is this painting, The Witness here. That's the kind of grisaille painting here. That's not for sale. Sorry, like you say. I love when an artist is like, I need to keep this one. It's there's a painting that Ali has in his studio that's very, very small, and it's probably my favorite painting you've ever made. It looks like it's scored, like scratched away, and where it's scratched away, there's this gold leaf that's showing, and it's one of my favorite of your pictures. And this is very different. But your paintings kind of look like this in the beginning sometimes. Is that fair to say?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, because I usually start grisaille, but then I'm a tonal painter. I start grisaille, I build it up, I build the lights, I build the darks. As I'm doing it, I'm find things in it, and then later color slowly starts to show up or not. I have a lot of paintings that I've done that are just monochrome as well, like this one.
So did this come together pretty quickly?
It did, which is never happens.
Yeah.
And, you know, it came very quickly because, and what I really like about it is that, like, there's a feeling of like a storm that I was able to capture.
Also horizon, like there's a sense of space in it. There's a lot that's just it's still good to know when to walk away.
I think Holly would like this because it's a combination of Goya and Ryder. So the landscape is I was looking at a lot of Albert Pinkham Ryder, those like sort of like stormy like landscapes, and I started there, and then the figures just sort of like came right away. Like I just knew that they had to go there. I think I actually maybe dreamed about it.
Are there more than 3 figures in that painting? There's like three.
Well, when you look at them at first, usually, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but so far, the people that I've stood in front of, they usually see 2 figures that are equally, like they're equal size, and they both have the same kind of stick, and, you know, they're just going at it. It's kind of sad, really. But then you might see a 3rd figure, and then it changes the whole dynamic.
There's kind of
There's a riddle.
There's kind of like a specter thing in the upper right-hand corner too, which is almost like a figure. So, but once you see the 3rd figure in there, you can't unsee it. So try to find the 3rd figure in there.
I think that's why some paintings that I've done work in a monochrome way, because they do this thing. They do this sort of like, what is it, like the rabbit and the. What is that?
The duck rabbit?
Yeah,
duck rabbit, the philosophical.
Because it's hard to do that once you like bring in colors, but when it's in a more monochrome, I see them, my monochrome paintings, I really see them having a dialogue with engravings and etchings.
Yeah. Where's Molly? Is Molly here? Do we want to open up for questions? Is that one of the things we're.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Ali?
And do they need the mic if they have questions?
I can.
And if so,
I can
where's
tour the crowd.
A 3rd mic?
Tapestries or
Tapestries?
fabrics, because it seems like a lot of your figures are wearing like elaborately patterned clothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I use I use that in order, like for example, like the green right there where you have all the circles. Like I use that in order to put in certain symbols in the paintings. Like, so those are a combination of Ouroboros and also again the AI meta. So it's like I'm kind of playing with both of those symbols. So sometimes they're used to allude to certain symbols, and sometimes they're used just in a formal way to stop the eyes from moving around and such. But I do look at a lot of paintings that have, especially like Venetian Renaissance paintings, because they had all the silks coming from the east, so they had monopoly on that. So therefore their colors were the most amazing colors.
It's very Japanese too, like
Japanese
Aubrey
too,
Beardsley or Marie Cassatt taking the patterned
absolutely like
things from fabric.
Hiroshige is like one of my favorite artists. So,
anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
Where do you see these paintings sitting in relation to the digital? Because like I think about Warburg, it seems very proto-algorithmic. And then obviously there's the AI Cyclops interplay. And a lot of the gestures also remind me of Richter. So obviously the paintings aren't about the internet, but they kind of feel like that experience of being on the internet where you see sort of like this maelstrom of horror, but you can also pick out some individual moments.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Richter, because in 2013 or 14, I also have synesthesia, so I hear sounds from the painting. So I wanted to, for some reason, I had it in my head that I wanted to paint the sound of internet. And I'm talking about AOL dial-up sound, because now we don't have a sound. And I kept thinking that like Richter's paintings have that sound of the internet for me. So I started to do a few paintings where I did like drag the paint in the same way, and I could hear the sound of the digital intervening into the paintings, and that's always sort of present in my work. There's always some kind of a technological digital thing that's intervening in the paintings, just because it's intervening in my life too. So yeah, it's something I'm always thinking about.
Anyone else have any questions?
First, thank you for the talk. And you mentioned about the spontaneous aspect of your work, and like something like uncontrolled hand. Sometimes your hand brings something in the painting. And I was curious about like the process of, because I think that's a level that is very connected to like the mind space you have when you kind of attack the canvas. I was curious, is it like you have like a ritual, like to get to a mind space to attack the canvas? And also, you mentioned that it takes long for you to make the paintings, and I was curious if you kind of follow the same idea when you're working, or you see like each time that you start working again on a piece, is it like a collage of ideas, or it's more, I mean, for you is more like a united idea that you follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about how I like to work from detail, and then the overall sort of happens from starting from the detail. I don't know if that's has something to do with, I don't know, my background, because I mean, that's sort of like exist in landscape paintings and Persian miniature paintings as well, but it's always different, you know? Like each time when I start a painting, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, really, you know? It's very slow. It kind of, you know, I was telling somebody that I have to kind of trick myself in the studio, you know? Like you have the painting up, you come in, but then you set stuff around the studio, like my tables with my books and drawing and so on. So you're there, you're looking at the painting, but it doesn't always have to be like the labor aspect of doing it. A lot of times I come in and nothing happens really, but that's fine too, because maybe I come in the next day and a lot of things happen. And I think this thing about, I was telling John earlier, that small painting over there, the forest, that, believe it or not, that, you know, like a big painting like this takes 2 months, because I only work on one painting at a time. That one took 4 years. And the reason was, it's not that I was working on it for 4 years, but I had created a sort of a forest before having my forest upstate. And then I didn't know what to do, you know? I just didn't know where it wants to go. So it just sat there and sat there and sat there. And then I took it upstate, and it was finished in 2-3 hours. And it had to sort of I had to go experience something and bring it back to the painting in order for it to complete. So more and more I've become sensitive to this, that sometimes it's a time thing. Like you just have to read something, see something, have a conversation, whatever, and then maybe you come back, then you know what to do. Yeah.
Any other questions?
That shy artist has a question.
Where?
Over there.
Oh.
You. You. I'm just kidding. Just because she told me earlier.
You did say you had a question, right? Okay. Any other questions? So you mentioned how you hear paintings. One of the so we've talked kind of about the motion, and we've talked about this. What I said was kind of Japanese. These are very rhythmic passages, also. Where you have these repetitive movements. Is that something that you that you're aware of? As I mean, does that make sense for you to think of them as like kind of sonically rhythmic to you, or?
I think I'm thinking about them as like the energy of the painting, maybe, you know? And it's sort of like the forest ones have the energies going like this, where in this case, the energy is like moving throughout the painting, and it's this sort of like a tentacle sort of thing, but there's like also water. But then, like for example, and then there's like these architectural elements in the painting that's also kind of newish for me, like a couple of years new. For example, like maybe I should just point it out, but like, you know, like you have this here, which is like it's from a tarot card, so it's like it's the Justice. So you have like the Justice card here, and then you have this large figure here who's like tampering with the Justice. And then here you have the Hierophant, which kind of stands for the academy. It stands for institutions, but then it's sort of crumbling. So but then there's this, you know. So there's all these sort of geometric elements that I have newly brought into my work to work with these more like biomorphic kind of shapes as well.
Yeah, it seems to literally deepen the space of your paintings too, the way you've been putting in these lines and these structures.
And also it's because
we have a question.
Okay, there you go.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's just so I had one thing I really wanted to ask you is like, what are the meanings of spirals? Because you mentioned the spiral, and when you were speaking about your thoughts, like, do spirals mean anything for your work? And then I thought about the temporality of your work that I find really interesting. It's because it's not paintings that you see and you see a landscape and so you understand everything at once, but so you see it and first you only see, like you almost see abstraction, and then the longer time you spend, the more figures emerge.
Yeah, and that's sort of that breaking the space has always, you know, been something I've been wanting to do, and it sort of happened slowly. You know, like maybe if you look at my work from 15 years ago, like they might have more of a sort of a world landscape feel to them, where you do have a foreground, background, middle ground, horizon. Maybe the figures were kind of at the bottom, and then you had a sky and so on. But then over time, I just kept wanting to break the space more and have less of a hierarchy of where things are. And also, like, I like the idea of the viewer not knowing where they are in the painting, you know? Like, because when you have a landscape, you know where you stand. You're standing in front of, you know, you could see the middle ground, foreground, background, and so on, so you could imagine. But in this case, I kind of wanted to have, like, I don't know, maybe more of a cubist sort of space, or a space that, you know, larger figures could be on top and smaller figures could be in the middle. It didn't really matter. And they're function more like a dream, more like a hallucination than a space that we know. Even the forest ones, really, we kind of see the forest, but we don't really see our relationship with it, like where we are, you know.
We're in this, I think we ask paintings at a certain level to do so much now, because they exist in this landscape of all this other media, of the digital, of so many, of this barrage of images, and the way you're able to manage all that. I think about Nengi Omuku's work, what was here, where there's like an interior, but then a sky or like an ocean, and it's like 4 different scenes kind of coming together with figures in there that kind of operate across these scenes. The Nicole Eisenman show, where there's, I mentioned the auctioneer, but then there's like a moonlit sky, and there's these other things. So there's like 4 different scenes collapsing in the same space. And I see this in your paintings too, this whole new, where before if you were doing landscapes, it was kind of a unified landscape. Now it's like this other space where all of these other spaces collapse, where time collapses, where all of these meetings from figures across history, from the human to the monstrous, all kind of come together, right?
Well,
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, maybe as a critic too, we're like, do something new, paintings, you know, it's like there's a kind of demand to it, but you have to do it with such grace and elegance to pull it off. And you're developing this very distinctive, you're elaborating upon your own language in a way that's like really opening up your paintings.
Well, the challenge is, you know, for all of us, it's like you have the world going at such a speed, and how do you slow that down a little bit, you know? How do you slow it down, but you still have some kind of a relationship to that world as well? You're not totally dismissing it and like painting a vase or something, you know what I mean? It's like you're sort of dealing, you know, it's the Leviathan, you're like dealing with it. You're trying to grapple with all these things that are going on. And it's challenging because, you know, the way the human brain now has to deal with information is insane. You know, like we're not made for that. But somehow we are dealing with it, and it's accelerating too. But I think the forest helps.
The forest helps. That's what I was thinking too. We need the forest also. All right, let's leave it with the forest. Oh, we're in the city. Thank you.